I've always been a striver. The world likes to put a pretty bow on striving by calling people like me an overachiever, ambitious, type A, and perfectionists. I am all those things. But at the core of it, it starts with striving. I have this race internally where I can't get to the next destination fast enough. And when I get there, it's not good enough. The striving has caused me an incredible amount of anxiety and stress to the point of creating health and relationship issues. Not to mention blows to my self worth. I'm learning though. Through the grace of God, I'm learning. So much so that if you had known me a few years ago, my transformation would blow you away. I was working 60 plus hours a week in a job I loved with an amazing team and bosses, but I was overwhelmed and stress and perfectionism were at an all time high. Throw in a high risk pregnancy, emergency C section, hospitalization for my baby, and first time mama moments, I was a hot mess. I was in and out of the doctor for stomach issues, heart palpitations, weird body reactions. You name it, I had it. And I had had enough. Thinking my job was the problem, I went on a search to find another. And I did. And it was a dream come true. This dream job flew me from Minnesota to Silicon Valley for a final interview. I studied everything I could about the company in the little time I had between momming and working. Instead of enjoying the almost 4 hour plane ride out to the interview, I crammed all I could in my brain to prep and prepare. But nothing could have prepared me for the life changing experience I encountered. When I entered the building for my interview, the dream job was a dream job. It was everything you imagine a Silicon Valley job to be: free lunches, sandals and t shirts, and the buzz of all things cool. They placed me in a small office that felt like 100 degrees, and the grilling began. The first two interviews were brutal. I couldn't have been more out of my element. By the time the third and fourth interviews came about, which I nailed, I felt like I was roasting in an oven and counting down the minutes until the interviews were over. I soon realized that the heat was internal overwhelm, not from the interview, but from the life I was interviewing for. I flew halfway across the country to interview for a life I was trying to escape. As I said my last thank yous and politely exited the doors as fast as I could, I got not but 2 steps from the door and pulled out my phone to call my husband. He barely got out his hello before I burst into sobbing tears, saying, I can't do this anymore. I spent that night in a hotel room contemplating the life I had grown to know and how I could get away from it. All the roads led to more anxiety and fear. The next morning, as I waited to get on the plane to the life I flew away from, I Googled how to know when to quit your job. And divinely, right in front of me were the 3 questions that would change my life. Those 3 questions were: 5 years from now, would you be happy living the same life you are right now? 5 years from now, what would you love to be doing? And if you had $1 billion, what would you do with it and why? My answer to the first question was no, a hard no. My answer to the second question was that I would love to spend more time with my family. I wanted to help and encourage people with all my skills, and I wanted to breathe. My answer to the third question was traveling, exploring, and giving back to causes in my community. It mostly involved helping others on a grander scale. As I thought through my answers, I recognized that my life didn't align with what I wanted. And all of a sudden, as my feet hit the jet bridge, the words, I'm going to quit my job, popped into my head. It was as if the Holy Spirit placed them there because as soon as the thought came, so did an overwhelming sense of peace. As my butt hit the plane seat, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to quit my job. So fast forward to today. I'm the founder and creative director of Faith and Gather, host of the Faith Inspired podcast, and a business and life coach. I get to spend my days encouraging women to exchange their lives of overwhelm and stress for one filled with more joy, by dreaming big, living in bold faith, and being obedient to where God is calling them. I am living the life I dreamed about as I walked onto that plane a few years ago. How I got here wasn't as simple as a snap of a finger, but my steps helped lead the way to a life I never thought possible. Steps that included digging deep and reassociating myself with my passions, skills, and desires that God placed in my heart, establishing my priorities and core values and letting those lead my schedule, not the other way around. Removing and delegating tasks in my life so I could make room for how God wanted to fill those spaces. Getting real with my finances so when God said move, I could move without hesitation. And most importantly, understanding how I connected best with the Lord and making Him my number one priority. I'm still working on overcoming my need to strive, but my life has utterly and completely transformed. Of course, stresses come. That's just life. But how I deal with them looks and feels different. I surrender, rest, and trust more than ever before. And although I don't always get it right, God has a great way of reminding me of where my provision and strength come from. So if you heard a little of your story in mine, I'd love to walk with you to a life filled with less stress and more joy. I believe that God has so much more in store for you. And although I quit my job, you don't have to leave yours to see the transformation you hope for. Click the links below to find out more about how you can start living a less stressed, more joy filled life.